Hello everybody, welcome to episode 12 of Little Big Knits. My name is Selma and I am coming to you from Ottawa here in Canada, where we are having yet another really cold day. We're again in the minus 20 Celsius range and it's really cold, but here we are. I'm podcasting again. I did last week, but I wanted to share something a little different with you today, so I thought I would chime in today as well. My family's still away and I'll be back this week, and then we'll be really busy, so I may not be able to podcast for a little bit. So I thought, why not get in there with another episode? So hello again. Thank you for joining me. I am Selma Knits on social media. If you happen to be on Instagram or on Ravelry, you can find me as Selma Knits. And yeah, thank you for joining me today. Thank you if you're a first-time viewer. There have been lots of people telling me that they've just subscribed, so thank you so much. And thank you again for coming if you are a returning viewer. It's pretty cool to think that there have been people who've been in this Little Big Knits community since the beginning, so thank you very much. We also have a Ravelry group in which you can introduce yourself, and lots of people have lately, so thank you so much. You can also ask a question in the Ask Away thread if you like. You can join in our cals, or the show notes also are there. If you are wanting to check out something that I mentioned during the podcast, I try and put as much information in the show notes in there as I can. So last episode I announced a 2,000 subscriber giveaway, and that is still going on. I'll be drawing for that next time I record, which will be sometime perhaps towards the end of January. And so if you're interested in that and you haven't watched episode 11, go back and watch it, and make a comment in the comment thread for episode 11. Comments here won't count for that, but feel free to comment. I love reading people's comments and responding and so forth. For the giveaway, I won't be responding, since it just makes it easier for me to do the random generator if there aren't extra comments. Each comment is an entry. So yeah, so go back and check that out if you're interested. Thank you so much to everybody who's entered already and who has made comments about the podcast, about anything that you'd like to see. I really appreciate. I've taken note of every single thing that people have mentioned, and hope to be able to incorporate those things here and there. There were lots of suggestions around things that you'd like to see in terms of garment making, in terms of some just general knitting things, some of the stuff that I've already done, such as the sock review, or showing duds, sweaters that I've worked on that haven't worked out so well, and other things too, like some people wanted to see some of the art in the house, or pictures of Ottawa, things like that. So I really appreciated all the suggestions. It was really great, and so every time there's a new one, I jot them down, and I hope to incorporate those things. So thank you very much. So also one other little piece of administration, or administrati, as the Stockinette Zombies have a term they've coined. We have a knit along going on. It started in October and it goes until the end of March, so March 31st, and you can join in at any time, and whips are welcome. And this is our Garments Galore Cal, hashtag Garments Galore Cal. And I'm co-hosting this cal with my darling Kate of the Hawthorn Cottage Craft podcast. And we both have finished object threads. I also have an additional one for your first garment ever. And she's got one for anybody who's knit more than 1,400 yards to make a garment. In addition to our regular FO threads, there's chatter threads as well, and people are coming in to tell what they're knitting or asking questions, and it's been super duper fun. So feel free to join in. A lot of people have said they're just dying to make their first sweater. Take the plunge, go for it. Lots and lots of easy patterns that you can find on Ravelry. And if you are interested in you know, some support around that, you know, come to the chatter thread. I'm happy to help, as is, I'm sure, other people in the thread as well. So thanks to everybody for your participation in that. There are quite a few finished objects already, and it's so much fun to see what people are making and the beautiful things that people are making. So congratulations to everybody. I do have a little co-host who is appearing again, still quite beside herself by the weather, so she is whining a lot. But anyway, we'll see if she happens to make an appearance. So anyway, Happy New Year to everybody. This is January 6th, I believe. No, January 7th. It's Sunday. And Happy New Year. Bonne année en français. Feliz Año Nuevo in Spanish. Hyvää uutta vuotta in Finnish. And let me try Turkish. It is Yeni yılını kutlu olsun. So Happy New Year to everybody. I joined in all the languages that I happen to have an association with. My father is Turkish and my mother is Finnish. I speak Spanish at home and French at work and English. So there you go. Thought I'd show off a little bit. Anyway, so yeah, first week of January has gone by already. New Year's came and went. As you know from last week, or last time I podcasted, which is a little over a week ago, I was on my way to see my father in Quebec City, which was great fun. Had a nice trip there and a nice trip back, knit tons, and had a nice quiet time with my dad. I was happy to find him in good form. He's had some fairly serious health issues over the last year, and he was in far more robust shape than I expected to find him in. So that was really great. And we watched some old movies. We watched Vertigo by Hitchcock and The Maltese Falcon with Humphrey Bogart, which was nice to see. I know that The Maltese Falcon is a real favorite with many people. I think I might need to watch it again because I just found it perhaps overly stylized somehow, and I didn't quite believe Humphrey Bogart, but I think I'd like to see it again. And Vertigo was great. It was interesting. I'd never seen it. I still think that Rear Window is probably my favorite Hitchcock movie, but I haven't seen them all. And my dad keeps asking me if I've watched Psycho yet, and I'm like, I don't think I can, but we'll see. Perhaps I will one day. So anyway, it was really lovely, and I had a great trip back. I went down on the bus and came back on the train. Train is really, really a wonderful way to travel. I really enjoyed it. And so yeah, so today I thought I would share my 2 FOs, and I have 1 weenie whip. But because of all the questions and comments from last time, I thought that I would spend time on a question that came up in the comment section of the YouTube giveaway from last week, as well as in the Ask Away thread. So 2 people have requested for me to talk about sweater math, which is why the title of this podcast is called Sweater Math. Because they wanted me to talk a little bit about how I determine which size to make, or yarn substitutions and so forth. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time talking about that, as well as what I hope to knit next, because I'm in a little bit of a in-between stage right now. So I thought I'd share some of the ideas that I have for what's going to happen next, but I still haven't decided. And I thought I would share 3 of my most worn knits from 2017. So I'll do a little bit of that today. So let me just take a sip of my tea, which I have in this wonderful mug that Kate gave to me when she came to visit in the fall when we went to Rhinebeck. This is pottery from Ireland from Nicholas Moss, and it's just such a wonderful big mug to have my tea in. And the tea that I'm drinking today is actually the same tea that I was drinking last time, but I didn't show you the package this time. This is a local tea shop called Chai, and they are on the Quebec side in Gatineau on Eddy Street, and they make beautiful teas. This tea was gifted to me at Christmas time by by somebody at work, and it's really delicious. It's called Rooibos Safari, and it's very sort of citrusy. It's got grapefruit and other fruits and spices, and it's very lovely. And their teas are just very natural tasting, and I really enjoy their teas. They have another one that's a chocolate cardamom chai tea that is my absolute favorite of theirs. And they bring a lot of teas, very special teas from China primarily, but also from Japan and other places, and they have a beautiful selection of Japanese style teacups and such in their shop. Their website is on the back here. It's chai.ca. Don't know if you can see that. I don't know if they sell online, but definitely a lovely shop. And so it's just very close to my work, and I go every once in a while and buy some tea, but this was also given to me. So that is what I'm drinking today. So, last time I was working on the Tessellate sweater, and this time I am wearing on the Tessellate sweater. I have to say, it has taken up a lot of time. I kept having to adjust things. So this is the Tessellate sweater. This is my first FO for today. That is a design by Andi Satterlund, and it is meant to be a short cropped sort of vintage style sweater. It is an interesting and a very nice construction where you start from the top, you cast on the back, knit to under the arms, and then you pick up stitches from those shoulder stitches and do the front as well to the underarms, but of course working separately until you come to this point, and then you join in the round and you go down, and it's supposed to have a very sort of diminishing waistline, and then it's supposed to be cropped, and then you do a set in sleeve where you pick up, you do a lot of short row shaping to shape the shoulder cap, and then you continue with the sleeves. I really enjoyed making this sweater. The stitch patterns are really easy and lovely, but I started getting a little frustrated towards the end because it started getting fiddlier and fiddlier, and I had to rip back a little bit and continue again. And I'm not 100% sure that I am super thrilled with the results. I think it fits reasonably well in the shoulders. It changed, it got bigger after I blocked it, which is interesting because I have knit with Cascade 220, which is what I used before, with the exact same gauge for another sweater that I made a few years ago. Last time I was wearing a purple vest out of Cascade, I had made a sweater out of that, which has a chevron pattern all over it, and I'll probably wear it one day and you'll see it. And that sweater never changed shape, so I was a little bit surprised because the sleeves got longer on this, and a lot of people like long sleeves. I don't like them. I like them to be like just here. So this ended up being a little longer, so I'm sort of torn. Do I go back and shorten this, or do I just wear them like that? I haven't quite decided yet. I mean, they look nice that way. The sleeves I had to fiddle with. It turned out well. I told you last time that I cast on less stitches underneath here because I was concerned that it was going to be too big and that the armholes were going to be too big, and I think that that was the right decision. And actually they're generous sleeves on this sweater, which is great if you happen to have bigger arms like I do, but I think that would be a challenge for somebody with really slender arms. And if you were to make this sweater and you have more slender arms, I would definitely suggest making a more shallow or a shorter bit here before you increase for the underarms, and that'll help you make a smaller arm. You will have to fiddle with the numbers of stitches that you end up picking up, but I tend to do that anyway because I always am worried about how arms are going to fit, but they're pretty good. Then I got to the bottom of the sweater, and I told you this last time I podcasted that I felt that the sweater was too short. after having, you know, wet this and block it, and I'm wondering, oh, did it end up too long? So I'll just stand up and show you how it is. So here it is. I think it's actually all right. The sweater is really meant to be somewhere up here like that. And to be honest, with my bust, I don't know, I wasn't quite sure about that look. So mine has ended up around here, and now I wonder if it's a little too long, but I think it's okay. All right, so if I step back a little bit, it's like that. And from behind. So I think I'm happy with it, but I think I'll let myself make that decision, and I can always rip it back and change that if I wanted to. So anyway, I'm very happy I made this sweater, and I'll let you know eventually if it ends up kind of the sweater that I don't wear as often, or if it ends up being a sweater that I do wear a lot. But right now I'm really enjoying it. I mean, to be honest, this is the first time I've worn it, so am I really enjoying it? I don't know. I'll let you know. I'll let you know. But it is fitting quite well. It's interesting. I'm noticing that the shoulder seam has ended up out here, and I thought it would end up here, but this was, I showed it to you last time and I felt like I had to stretch it. It really required a little bit of blocking for it to just lie flat, and that made a big difference for how it was fitting in the shoulders and so forth. So yeah, I'm gonna say I'm quite happy with the results. I'm not like ecstatic, but I think it's gonna be all right. And the pattern was well written, that's for sure. I think the only place where I was left wondering was a little bit in the sleeve decreases. But otherwise, it really was a well-written pattern, and I enjoyed the stitch pattern on here. It was good, and I really do enjoy the Cascade 220. So this is the first FO. The next FO was the hat that I was knitting for my son. Had I started it? I don't think so. I think I had just put the yarn in the bag last time I podcasted. So, you know, I had a lot of knitting time this week because my family's away. I was on the train, on the bus for a few hours, and then watching movies with my dad. So there was a lot of downtime. I actually ended up knitting the first part of the sweater while watching Vertigo. I had finished the ribbing and I was starting the stockinette, and I only brought one ball of yarn, and I realized I wasn't going to be able to finish the sweater there, but I thought, well, I'm going to at least finish the first ball. Or not the sweater, but the hat. So I was knitting the stockinette portion while I was watching Vertigo. My father was a little horrified that I was going to be knitting while watching a movie, but I said, don't worry, it's stockinette in the round, I won't even look. And he really was like, you didn't look, you just kind of knit along. So that was great. I got into rhythm. It was black, and we did have the lights down, so I thought if I make a mistake, I'll just put it aside and watch without knitting, but I was able to. And actually, by the time we got to the Maltese Falcon the next night, I was sort of like, I've been knitting so much, I just need a break, and I just watched the movie. So I made this hat. I just improvised it. It's a very sort of slouchy hat that I made for my son. This was out of the, sorry, ooh, it's blowing out the video. This is out of Sandnes Garn Alpakka. Sandnes Garn makes two weights. They make a mini alpaca, which is more like a fingering weight, and they make an alpaca, which is kind of a DK weight. I would say sport DK weight. So this is the sport DK weight in their black, and I ended up knitting it on 3.5 millimeter needles for the ribbing and 4 for the rest of it. And this is going to be a Christmas present for my son. Whoops. So it's just a super slouchy hat. Hopefully a teenager will like it, and he'll wear it. So there you go. Super simple. I ended up casting on 110 stitches with the 3.5 millimeters, and I think that's actually quite a nice, we'll see if it loosens up a lot, but I didn't want to make it tight so that it would flatten his hair because he likes to style his hair in a particular way. And then I increased to 116 stitches, but then when I got to the decreases, I realized there was no math that was going to work with 116 stitches that I could figure out anyway. So I decreased a few, I think 4 stitches, and then I was able to do some, I don't even remember what I did, some decreases, and got to the end. So there you go. I really, really enjoyed this yarn. It's another nice yarn to work with that is a good price point. I had actually gotten this in the sale section at the store. It's alpaca, 100% alpaca. I really do love working with alpaca. You feel like there's butter going through your fingers. It's just got a buttery quality to it. And it knits up very nicely. I don't know if you can see the stitch definition. Oh, there you can, I think. It just has a really nice stitch definition. And it's a very nice yarn, and it's very warm. So even though this is not a thick sweater, this will probably, thick hat, I keep doing that all the time, sorry, it'll probably keep him quite warm if he actually wears it. Let's see if he does. I forgot to tell you guys last time, speaking of hats for our kids, I had made Isla the sockhead hat. I think I may have shown it to you on my first episode, if you've been with me since the beginning. It was made out of Skein yarn from Australia in the Lily Pond colorway. Isla wore it all the time. She even wore it in the summer when it was hot, occasionally, and then when school hit, she was wearing it all the time. And just before Christmas, she took it off in the schoolyard and it disappeared. So it's gone. And she was quite upset about it, and so was I. And usually, you know, when things go missing in the school, they end up back in the classroom, or they end up in the lost and found, and we checked a few times and it never showed up. So somebody appropriated it. So now I'm torn as to what to do. She right away started wearing my purple Ricke, and okay, no Yoda. Oh my goodness, she's being bad. No. She was just about to jump on my little setup here, which is quite precarious. So you would have noticed that, and I would have fallen all over the place or something on video. So now she's giving. She's very obedient actually, and she knows right away, okay, mommy doesn't want me to do that, and she goes away. So that's a great thing about this funny little cat. Anyway, I've completely lost my train of thought. I think I was going to tell you that, so my daughter lost the hat, and she started wearing my purple Ricke hat, which I showed to you a couple of episodes ago. And so hopefully she will be happy with that for a little while, because I'm not sure that I'm going to knit her another hat right away. And I'm realizing that another hat that I had knit her a while ago, I'm not seeing it anywhere. So now I'm beginning to wonder. She tends to be pretty good with hats, but now I'm starting to wonder. Anyway, and I'm just suddenly having this brain blip and wondering, did I already talk to you guys about this? I really hope I didn't. If I did, I apologize. Maybe I'm a bit more scattered today than I thought. Anyway, I'm going to move on before I say something else crazy. So that is essentially what I've done in the last week. I furiously worked on those two things. So needless to say, the 2 socks that I have not really gotten. I think I knit a couple of rows on one of the socks, and that was about it. Last week I told you that I was going to be starting a pair of socks for a person who's working on my team right now. And I had 3 potential yarns. Excuse me. He chose the opal yarn. This one that had purples and greens and reds, which was the German opal with the broken tag. That was this Schafpate, I think it was called. Schafpate 7, and then I won't even bother trying to repronounce the other thing or pronounce it again. So I've started socks for him. I started these yesterday, and that's it. This is my whip at the moment. I'm knitting them on my favorite, which is this magic loop business on Chow-Goose 2.25, and it's striping, and I'm doing a 3x1 rib there to keep it nice and snug. I have to say, one thing I find, I'm not quite sure how to put this. I feel like, you know, some people have bigger ankles, some people have medium ankles, some people have skinny ankles. And if you have skinny ankles but a normal sized foot, I find there can be a challenge to make a sock in a way that it fits the leg properly or the ankle properly. Last time I made a pair of socks for my husband, I decided to actually, after I do them toe up, so once I had done the heel, to decrease, and those socks actually look really good on him. I'm wondering what to do with these socks, because this particular employee is another person who has rather slender ankles, and I'm concerned that they're going to be baggy. So I haven't quite decided yet. I might just make them as conventional socks. But that is an interesting consideration, because if somebody has skinny socks but a bigger foot, or skinny ankles but a bigger foot, then you know, fit can be really different. If you have any thoughts about that, feel free to mention down below in YouTube, or come into the Ravelry group where the show notes are to talk about your experience with that. So that's it, and that's how far I've gotten. Just about, I think, a full repeat. I think I may be going back into the bluey purple, so we'll see. And I'm actually housing this project in a bag, kind of an experimental bag that Sue of the Two Tangled Skeins podcast, but also the Tangled Skein CA Etsy shop made for me. She didn't end up making these on a more permanent basis, but she made this for me as an experiment, using some fabric that I had in my stash. And I said, oh, do you think, you know, you might want to do something with this? And so she ended up making me a series of bags with this fabric, which is really, really sweet. It's old and it's got a metallic. It's probably from around the 80s, and I bought it in Finland. I think it was Marimekko, but I'm not 100% sure. Marimekko is a Finnish textile company, and they do other things as well. They do clothing, and they do some kitchenware and curtains and sheets and stuff like that. But they started and they design their own fabrics, and so this is an old fabric from it, and I really liked it. So that's where I'm housing that project. So that's really what I'm working on, and to be honest, I feel like I'm really living up to my knitting in the moment and living in the moment concept that I sort of talked about last week, because I don't know what I want to knit. So I'm going to knit on those socks, as that's a little bit of an obligation knitting, in the sense that it's a gift for somebody, and it was a draw that I did at work. So I don't want them to languish. I want to get those done. So I'm going to focus on those, and in the meantime, figure out what I want to knit next. So over the last couple of months, I've shown you some swatches and that I've been working on and thinking about, and I'm still kind of thinking about. But I'm going to show you 4 different yarns, I think. Yes, 4 different yarns and things that I'm considering, and then we'll see where I go. Hopefully the next time I podcast, there will be some sort of work in progress associated with one of these yarns. So one of the yarns that I'm thinking about working with is this absolutely beautiful yarn that I bought at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. And it was made by a yarn that the sheep, or the goats, because it's actually mohair, were reared in Northumberland, spun in Yorkshire, and dyed by hand. And this is the Whistle Bear, and it's made out of their own mohair and their own Wensleydale. And I bought enough of these to make the Nook sweater. I don't remember who the Nook was by. down bar. That was, I believe it was in the first Len magazine. It's very simple raglan, top down, short sleeved little top. And the kind of thing that you could easily wear a blouse under. And so I am considering working with this. We're in January. Edinburgh Yarn Festival is in March, so I was in Scotland last March, and I thought this might be a nice thing to remember Scotland by. And so that is one possibility. A beautiful gray that I would wear with, you know, a blouse underneath of some sort, whether it were a patterned blouse or a white blouse or a light blue blouse or a gray blouse. So we'll see. That's one possibility. I am still considering this yarn. I had a regular ball, but it seems to have gone flying somewhere. This was Rowan Felted Tweed DK in this green colorway. I started swatching, and I bought this specifically to make a vest. I was thinking of making a vest inspired by Outlander, specifically by Claire, the main character, when she's in the 1940s period of the show. She had a vest that had cables coming down. I've since still want to make that kind of a vest that's round necked and kind of a little bit like this one, cropped to wear with a skirt. But I'm not sure about the cables anymore because I just don't know how this yarn would handle it. So I still have to swatch a little bit more. I took it off the needles. I don't remember what size needles I used, so I'm gonna have to sort of re-swatch. I think I used 3.5, but I don't know. And I actually kind of bought this to go with this skirt. I'm not 100% sure if it will go with it, but there's little bits of this kind of green in the skirt. So that's another possibility. This would require a lot of mental space because it would mean me thinking about the stitch, about the shape, the number of stitches I want to cast on, how I want it to fit. So this would be kind of my own design. So we'll have to see if this gets called in the next couple of weeks. There's also, I had shown you guys a couple of episodes ago, I was swatching for the Janus sweater. So this is still a contender, but I need to do a little bit more swatching for it. And that was by Irina Anikeva, and I was swatching using this yarn called Ethical Twist. Which was organic wool and 30% alpaca. So I wanted to swatch with bigger needles and I haven't gotten there yet. So that's another possibility. And then the last possibility, excuse me while I reach down and get it. I've had this yarn in my stash for a while. I had gotten it, actually I was going to show you one that didn't have the price tag on it, but oh well. I paid $4.99 a ball for it. This is Inca Gold. It's 100% alpaca. They call it, I believe, yeah, it's kind of a sport fingering weight, definitely a fingering weight. It says 26 stitches, but it really is quite fine. I had originally wanted to make the Caroline sweater by Amy Miller, which I still really like and I still really want to make, although it would require a lot of modifications. It's a pieced sweater. I would make it to be a seamless sweater, so I'd have to figure that out. So that's a possibility. It's a lovely sort of loose fitting with sweater, raglan style with cables there, and the cables go down the side as well. It's a beautiful, beautiful sweater. But I don't want to put the paper on the floor because you know who is going to start working on it. I took this book out of the library, Nora Gaughan's Knitted Cable source book. Beautiful book. Beautiful book. And there is this sweater called the Batwing pullover in here that is just beautiful. So now I'm trying to decide whether I want to make the Batwing or the Caroline using that alpaca, because I think this would be lovely in it. I do have other yarns. I could make one in another yarn, but they both I think would work really beautifully. This is using a yarn that has a little bit of mohair in it. It's meant to be using Quince & Company Piper, and I think the alpaca is a good substitute because it also has that slight halo to it. So that's another possibility. It's just a stunning construction. Got kind of a dolman sleeve happening, although it's knit in a top-down raglan style. Fascinating. This is an absolutely stunning book, by the way. I've actually asked Santa, one of the Santas in my life, for this book for Christmas, so we'll see if that ends up coming my way. But just a beautiful book for cables. Lots of wonderful ideas, many intense and complex, and others that are just beautiful and simple, and lots of different things in here. So if you're interested in cable knitting and a big fan of cable knitting, this is a beautiful book. So I took this out of the library this time. Even the sweater on the back, it's got a very interesting construction because it's got this sideways thing happening on the back. I was looking at that as well. So those are the things that I am thinking about right now, and we'll see what ends up actually calling me over the next couple of weeks. I feel like the nuke that I was going to make out of this mohair is probably the simplest of them all. Maybe I just need a little palette cleanser, something simple. We'll see. We'll see what calls me over the next few weeks. Perhaps I'll not knit a sweater right now and move to a shawl for a little bit, because there are many shawls that I want to make. But anyway, that is what I'm thinking about. And then I thought I would share with you some of my favorites from 2017. I think I knit 10 garments, I think, in 2017. I counted and then I forgot. I knit 30 projects in 2017. And there was a variety. There were some hats and some socks and some shawls, and I think 10 garments, one of which was a poncho for my daughter, a sweater for my husband that I ended up having to keep. And I've actually been thinking about pulling it out and knitting one for him. We'll see if I actually do that. But 2017 was a great year for garment knitting, and I made some lovely sweaters in 2017. But I thought I would show you 3 that I have worn a lot for now. And then I did one episode where I talked a little bit about a dud, and I had somebody requesting to see more sweaters that perhaps I've worn less, or things that I've worn less. So there's more to come on that. But I thought I would show you, the first thing that I thought I would show you was a skirt. This is a skirt that I came up with myself. I had seen a skirt on Ravelry that looked like this, that was a different weight, and I just decided that I could figure it out on my own. I have knit 3 or 4 skirts before this. I've knit 4 skirts before this. So, you know, I had a bit of an idea of how I wanted it to be shaped. So I decided, instead of having a sweater for Edinburgh Yarn Festival, I wanted to have a skirt. And I've worn this a lot with black leggings and a longer sweater. And in fact, something else that I've knit this year, I often end up wearing them together. And I've gotten a lot of wear out of this. This is made out of Berroco Inca Tweed. And it comes kind of like a mid-thigh. It's sort of a bit of a mini skirt, so it's great to wear with leggings. And I did a fold over waistband and then put an elastic in it. So there's an elastic in there. And then increased to sort of the largest part of my hips, and then went straight down and finished off with some ribbing. I have a project page for it, so if you're interested, you can go and check And I just put a bit of yarn there as a knot to mark the back of the sweater, because I did do some slight increases for the bum in the back. So it makes a difference which way I wear it. But I've really, really enjoyed this sweater, and the yarn has been great. I keep saying everything's a sweater in my life. It's a skirt. One thing with skirts, I think it's really important to either use pure wool or to use a mixed blend. I don't know how acrylic would fare on its own, but I would never knit a skirt solely out of cotton, because cotton would just sag in the bum area as it might in the elbows or whatever. So personally, I don't think, unless you're making a really loose sort of tiered skirt, for example, or something like that, I'd never use cotton. But so this is a Berroco Inca Tweed, and it's a mixture of a variety of things, and it's a very tweedy skirt, and I just love it. So another thing that I made in March, actually, and I made this while I was in Scotland, and I've actually worn with the skirt. And you'll recognize the color because the cowl that I made recently, the Getting Warmer cowl by Espace Tricot, was used with leftover yarn from this. And this is I think it's called the Simple Turtleneck, and it's by Anna and Heidi Pickles. And it's just a very wonderful, loose-fitting turtleneck. I just washed it, actually. So it's a turtleneck, and it's a loose-fitting sweater with a split hem at the bottom. Actually, I had it drying on my rack, so you can see a little bit the lines on it. And it's just a fabulous thing to wear. I wear it with the skirt. I wear it with jeans. It's a nice, cozy sweater. I really, really, really enjoy it, and it's a lot. It was a simple thing. It was a great sweater to knit while traveling, because it you know, it was fairly mindless and at a loose gauge, and it went by very quickly, and it's just a great simple fit, you know, like just one of those Saturday sweaters, but I have also worn it to work. So this was something else that I've gotten a lot of use out of. And it's a simple sweater, and sweaters don't have to be complicated. And especially if you're choosing a sweater and you don't have a lot of experience knitting sweaters, or no experience, it's great to choose something that doesn't have to fit perfectly, because it'll just be, you know, really easy to wear. And even if you've got a lot of experience, it's nice to have sweaters like this. So I really enjoy that. And then the other thing that I made, that you will have seen if you've been watching me for a while, because I made this for Rhinebeck. And this was the Camden Hills Poncho by Elizabeth Smith, which I made with yarn I had gotten at Rhinebeck the first time I went, so 3 years ago. It was the Persimmon's Farm Alpakka. And boy, I loved working with this yarn. Again, alpaca. And I wear this a lot. It's beautiful to wear. It's soft and wonderful. Not as pilly as something like cashmere, but as warm and as soft and as buttery. I wear this with pants. I wear it with this skirt. I've even worn it with this skirt, and leggings, and a blouse of some sort underneath. And I get a lot of wear out of this. I wear it quite often. Last week, when I podcasted, I was wearing a vest, the top-down Let Lopi vest that I made, and I said I wear that all the time. It's almost like a uniform. This is another one. I really enjoy vests, so it was great to make something like this that, again, is loose-fitting, and it just has a beautiful drape to it, and I really, really enjoyed this. I enjoyed making it, and I enjoy wearing it. So yeah, so those are three highlights from 2017, which was a good knitting year. It was a good knitting community year as well. In 2017, I started this podcast. So this was a super highlight from 2017 for me. And Rhinebeck was a wonderful knitting highlight from 2017 as well. In my personal life, 2017 was a decent year. It started out really well. We had lots of fun things in the first part of the year. The second part of the year was taken up a little bit by illness in my family with my in-laws and my daughter, and just some weird things that happened in our personal life. But definitely the knitting community and the highlights all around knitting, like Rhinebeck was just so fun this year with our friend Kate coming over, and Holly coming along with us, and the podcast. Those were like wonderful, wonderful additions to 2017. So that is officially 2017 in a nutshell. So, as I mentioned earlier, I thought I would talk a little bit about sweater math. And what I mean by sweater math. So somebody had asked in the Ask Away thread in the Ravelry group to talk about how to determine if you want to substitute yarns, especially weights of yarn, you know, how to determine what size you're then going to make. And somebody else had also asked about yarn substitutions in the comments, as I mentioned already. So I talk a little bit about what I do, and I do this probably with every sweater that I'm going to make. Now, the purple mohair sweater that I just showed you, math was minimal because I really didn't care how big it was going to be. I knew I wanted it loose, but sometimes it really does matter. But I always do some sort of math. So first of all, when I'm choosing a yarn for a project, obviously the weight will matter, but it's not primordial because I can kind of do some math and figure it out. And that's what I'll share with you. But one thing to take into account when you're choosing a yarn, or what I take into account when I'm choosing a yarn, is how is this yarn going to sit afterwards. So knitting like something like this Cascade 220, this is not a particularly drapey yarn. It might relax a little bit, as I've seen with this sweater, but it's not going to have a huge drape. So it's a great yarn for cables, for example, because with cables you want a yarn that's going to sit, kind of like, I'm sort of saying it as if you're sitting on a shelf kind of thing, right? Whereas with something else like the gray Camden Hills poncho that I showed you, a little bit of drape is actually better for that project. It'll let it sort of hang and flow. So that's going to have a little bit of an impact on your sweater, and so that's something that I tend to keep in mind. So sometimes I might think, okay, that is not what I'm going to make that sweater with because it's just not going to react the way I want it to. Sometimes we're not right, even though we think we are, and things don't necessarily turn out well. Like I made one sweater, which I'll show you at some point, with a yarn with silk in it, and I realized that was really not the best yarn for that sweater. I would have been better off with a plump superwash wool, for example, or something like that. But that's definitely something to think about. The other thing to think about before you start doing your sweater math is what kind of ease do you want? So in a sweater like this, I tend to go for 0 ease because I know that it's going to relax a little bit, right? So this now probably has 1 or 2 inches of ease to it. But that's definitely something to think about. Ease means how tight the sweater is. So negative ease means that it's very tight and, you know, it's pulling. So if you want a really snug sweater, you have to take that into account. Positive ease means that it's got extra to it, right? So I tend to, depending on the sweater, if I want a sweater like this, I'll sort of just do my swatch and then calculate from there. I don't tend to wash my swatches, but that could be something to do if you want to make a full square, wash it, lay it out, and then calculate the gauge before, calculate the gauge after, and then that'll help you decide how big you want to make your sweater. So when you're going to figure out the size that you're going to make, you want to take into account the gauge, and that can be either before or after washing it. I'm going to try and be as clear as I can about this, but I'm a little bit nervous about how coherent this is going to be. But anyway, let me know if it wasn't. So basically what I do is I do my swatch. Let's say I'm going to choose some simple numbers to make it easy. Let's say I want 40 inches across. I want a sweater that's going to fit 40 inches. So that may be 40 inches with positive ease, it may be 40 inches with negative ease. Let's say you're a size 36, but you want a loose fitting sweater and you say, okay, I want like 4 inches of ease, then you're going to say that's 40 inches what I want as my final outcome. Let's say the pattern, in fact, it doesn't really matter what the gauge of the pattern is. Let's say your gauge that you're getting over 4 inches or 10 centimeters is 20. You know that over 4 inches, 20 stitches over 4 inches is 5 stitches over 1 inch, right? So then you know that 5 inches times 40 inches, because if you want 40 inches across, is 200, right? Right? So 5 times 40 is 200. So you know that you need to have 200 stitches around here, around the bust area, in order for that sweater to fit in that area, and hopefully to pretty much fit everywhere. The rest might require modifications as well, but generally what I do is I figure that out. I figure that, let's say I need 200 stitches. Then I go into the pattern, whether it's a top-down raglan, a pieced sweater, or a bottom-up sweater, and I try to figure out how many stitches or which size has about 200 stitches around the bust. So I read into the pattern, and let's say it's a top-down raglan. So they'll say, you know, start with this many stitches, increase, you know, until you have a gazillion stitches, and then divide for the body and the sleeves. And usually around that area, they'll say the sleeves have now been divided and you have this many stitches on your needles. And now, you know, knit until you have 15 inches or whatever. That number where they say that is the number of stitches essentially around the bust, because generally the armpit, you know, where you are dividing for the sleeves is going to be around, you know, the bust area. And so whatever that size is, where there is the 200 stitches, that's the size that I'm going to make, regardless of what size it says at the front of the, or at the beginning of the pattern. So if that happens to be the third size, then I know that I'm making the third size. If it happens to be the fifth size, then that's the size that I'm going to make. And so that's essentially how I tend to decide which size I'm going to make. I don't go for size the 39 bust or the 41 bust or the 36 bust, because it's going to depend on my gauge, and my gauge may be the same as the designers, or depending on, you know, how they've knitted or the yarn or whatever, but it may not be. And so I do that regardless of whether my gauge is the same as them, because it also helps me know. Sometimes it's not 100% clear. They'll say finished size or not finished size, but you know, I'm trying to figure that out. And so I'll read through the pattern and sort of analyze that, and then I'll look at, you know, the construction at the top or at the bottom, and sort of see, does this all make essential sense? And then I'm also seeing what kind of decreases are they adding into the torso of the sweater, you know, how many are they starting with, and so forth. So that's essentially how I do it. I take the gauge, I bring it down to 1 inch, I multiply it by the number of inches I want for the bust area, and then I choose the size that goes with that. So I hope that has been helpful. I hope it wasn't too convoluted. If you have any further questions regarding that, let me know. I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about it. But that's essentially what I do. So if you're substituting let's say the sweater calls for worsted weight, but you have a light worsted weight and their gauge is 18 and yours is 20, you know, you can adjust accordingly. Or you've decided that rather than a worsted weight, you want to use a DK weight yarn. Well, then you know that your gauge is going to be tighter and you're probably going to be making a couple of sizes larger than you intended to make. So, so there you go. Like the Camden Hills poncho, that was meant to be knit in a worsted weight yarn, and I really used more of a fingering sport weight yarn. The gauge was quite different, and I knew that I was going to, and I still made the size the smallest size because it had a ridiculous amount of ease, but I knew that it was going to have less ease, and I was quite okay with that. So, you know, these are the sort of the thoughts that one has when thinking about that and kind of analyzing. So anyway, let me know if that was helpful. I hope it was. So I think that kind of brings us to the end of this episode. So this week, and certainly the end of the knitting context, or the knitting content, everything's sort of going back to normal. Kids are going back to school and everybody's going back to work as of this week. Anybody who took the full 2 weeks off for Christmas. My family's coming back on Thursday, so the kids are actually missing most of the first week of school. They'll be arriving first thing on Thursday morning. So they'll stay home Thursday and probably go back to school on Friday. But we will be celebrating our Christmas next Saturday. So I actually have to get cracking on wrapping presents and all that jazz, and getting the food organized and the last few presents bought. And so that's what we'll be doing. And then I will hope to just hang out with them and see them again. I really miss having them around and seeing all the kids coming through the house, their friends and so forth. So that's going to be fun. And January will be a month of, I think, just getting back into a routine. It's my mother's birthday this month, so I'm hoping to take her to Montreal to see an exhibit about Leonard Cohen that's happening at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Montreal. And then at the end of January, we have the two cousins and the aunt coming from Uruguay for a month to partake in all our winter goodness. So we'll have guests. So I hope to podcast in there somewhere, perhaps just before they arrive, because it may be a little bit of a challenge to podcast while they're here. I don't know. We'll see. But I'll see you in the next few weeks. I hope that January treats you well. Once again, Happy New Year. And we'll see you very soon. Take care, friends. Bye-bye.